with a lot of fighters.
Alright, so I think we can do this, right? Okie dokie. Alright, let's see where we're at here. Bring that up a little bit. Soften the lighting. Alright. Everyone, thank you for joining me. Appreciate y'all. Actually, what I want to do is figure out docs. Let's see. Oh, controls. I wanted to get the YouTube. Let's see if I can get the view going here. F11, we can toggle that. I guess I can just do this. Hang on. I'll toggle this. We'll stop the stream. Is it W? S? No. Oh. Here it is. Okay, cool. Yeah. All right, nice. I kind of want it to be. There it is. There it is. Okay, cool. Perfect. Okay, now we're good. All right. Let's try it again. All right, my dudes. Thanks for joining me. We are now doing a hero's journey. How to apply the hero's journey. And I'll start by, in the usual way, thanks for joining my live session where we talk about the things that matter. I'll tell you a little bit about my story. A few years ago, I came to New York City. Do I want to keep telling this story? I don't know. Yeah, I guess it's kind of fun. All right, so we'll tell the story. 2020, I came to New York City, and I came a broken man. I was at the end of my rope. I had been selling insurance for a while, which was good for a little bit, until I realized I hated it. And but it was a hard job to leave because it was 10 to 15 hours a week, and I could crank about $200,000, 150 to 200,000 a year with it, and I just couldn't take it anymore. It was making me sick, and I was just so depressed and so, I don't know, burnt out, I guess. And so when I arrived in 2020, I think I was in search of adventure. Probably I met a guy named Bitcoin Bill, and he got me into Bitcoin. And basically he was showing me his wallets. He was making $300,000-$400,000 with each trade, whatever it was, and he told me he had a dream that Bitcoin was going to go to $100,000. And I was so just needing something magical in my life that I thought, you know what, yeah, let's do this. Let's bet on Bitcoin. And so I put all my money into Bitcoin. I put in roughly $600,000 of my own money into this thing, and I triple leveraged it. So all the work that I put in there of my life, my entire life savings basically went into Bitcoin. I pulled out all my retirement accounts. I refied my condo, all plowed into Bitcoin, and then again triple leveraged it. So everything was great for a while. I called my mom, told her, "Hey, mom, I'm a millionaire," and that was probably right around February of 2021. And of course, in May of 2021, it all came crashing down. Went from 65,000 to below 30, and because I was leveraged so much, I got liquidated. Although I should have been fully liquidated, I was only partially liquidated because perhaps by the grace of God, the Ethereum network was too slow to liquidate me. And by the time it caught back up to me, Bitcoin had rebounded from below 30,000 to something like 35, 40,000, and I had recovered maybe 20 to 30% of my wealth. There were a couple times where I fully recovered, but I felt like there was no turning back. I felt like there was no turning back. I needed to make it back. I felt like I couldn't work at that time for some reason. I was just like, I can't. I'm too stressed to work. I don't want to work. I just want to make this money quick and tell everyone to fuck off and be rich. That was like my life's goal. And so I kept trading, kept trying to make it back, totally on tilt. Went up and down and up and down. Every cycle, my bag got lower and lower and lower. Kept losing money, until I was probably down to roughly my last $200,000, and I got scammed out of $60,000, and that's pretty much when I hit bottom. That was summer of 2022. I thought, okay, you know what? I need to try to find my way back. I started waiting tables. I got fired from my first restaurant job. Here I am, 45 years old, fired from a job that most 20-year-olds can do. I can do better. And my mom got so stressed out that she ended up in the hospital. And that was a low point. That was just the anxiety, the panic, and just the emotions that were going through my body were insane. And were insane. And I just thought to myself, if I can make it to the end of the year, that would be a life accomplishment. And that's when I started finding my way back. I started cleaning my room. I started adopting a different narrative for my life. And that's what we'll be talking about today. Oh man, this is really hard. I'm really frustrated. I'm really, like, no one's here. No one's listening to my thing. This cat keeps fucking. Oh, I'm really frustrated right now. Let me just take a step back. Oh, God. Okay. All right. Let's just. I keep. Okay, it's all right. Really frustrated right now. I'm really pissed off. Okay, let's just. We do the things that matter. We do it poorly if we need to, right? We're just gonna do it poorly. I feel like I'm not saying the right story. I feel like I'm making it too long. Alright, let's just keep going. Let's keep going. Let's keep going. Let's keep going. Oh my god. Everything is pissing me off right now. Everything is just pissing me off right now. Every fucking thing is pissing me off right now. Alright. Yo. We got one more chance. Let's try this. Let's try this last time. We're gonna go start to finish. Okay. Alright, welcome to my live stream. Thanks for joining me. We're here to talk about the hero's journey and specifically how to apply it to our lives. I'll tell you my story real quick. In 2020, I put everything on Bitcoin. I pulled out all my retirement accounts. I even refied my condo, plowed it all into Bitcoin, about $600,000 of my hard-earned money, and then I triple leveraged it. I actually had moved to New York in 2020, and I was at the end of my rope. My insurance job was killing me. I hated it. It wasn't hard. Maybe that's partially why I didn't like it. It become easy, and I guess, I don't know, it stressed me out. I was getting sick every 3 months, just my body revolting against me, and I was at the end of my rope. And along came this guy named Bitcoin Bill, and he started talking about this magical coin, Bitcoin, and I put all my money into it, and then we took a ton of leverage. It was great for a while. I thought I was a genius. I went from 600,000 to about 3.5 million in about 9 months. And I thought I was God, and I was sure it was going to go to 100,000, so I didn't sell a dime. And of course, in May of 2021, it dropped to below 30,000. And I should have been totally wiped out, but by God's grace, I guess you could say, the Ethereum network was too clogged to liquidate me. It just couldn't catch up, and I saw my health factor drop below 1. When it reaches 1, you're liquidated. I saw it drop to 0.9. It rebounded back, and by the time Ethereum caught up, Bitcoin also had rebounded from below 30,000 to about, I think, 35, 40,000. I recovered some of my money, and basically I was traumatized by all that, but I thought, I need to make it back. Of course you got to make it back. And so I just went up and down, up and down, up and down, trade after trade, sometimes making it back, but I needed to get to millions of dollars, and each time, and eventually, my money went down and down and down until summer of 2022. I got scammed out of $60,000. I probably had 200,000 left or something, and 60,000 I gave away to some scammer, and I realized at that point that I needed to stop. That was finally bottom. So in a way, I'm thankful to that guy, but anyways, in a way, I'm not. Oh, anyway, I don't know how I feel about it anymore, I guess. But yeah, it was a crazy ride. I was feeling super low. I had, lost my money in one of the worst ways possible. And I just, I saw the edge of the abyss, let's say. So I got a weight position, which I got fired from, and then my mom got so stressed she ended up in the hospital, and that might have been the lowest. I don't know. There was a lot of low points, but that was quite low. And but I eventually picked myself back up and started listening to Jordan Peterson, started cleaning my room. I got another weight job, the same one that I have now, and and I started telling myself, believing in a different narrative for my life. Instead of thinking that I'm a loser, this is the end. This is the end. There's no hope. I decided that I am in a redemption story. So this is what I want to talk about, how narratives are so powerful. And we've been talking about the hero's narrative and how this narrative is not just one that we celebrate today, but has been celebrated for all of human history. 7,000 years ago in Sumeria, when they started civilization, they founded that first city, they were telling the hero's narrative. You can find it in the Mayan culture and Greek culture. You can find it in ancient history. You can find it in today's culture. We tell this story over and over again. We talked a little bit about this. Every time you turn on a basketball game or a football game, you are watching and engrossed and possessed by, and you are you are drawn into the hero story. We can't stop watching it. So it's kind of this fascinating narrative. And we live in this world where there's all these splintered narratives. It just feels like he has a story, the Christians have one story, the Muslims have another story, the Hindi, and they're all fighting over it, and they're all fighting each other and killing each other over the story. And it's like, man, how do we decide what truth even is? Is there even a truth? And this is one story that we all seem to agree on. And so it's, why do we obsessively watch this story again and again? I believe it's because the hero story is our story. That we can't take our eyes away because we feel like somehow this tells us our destiny. So I want to play for you a couple clips here just to get started. And we're going to be talking about how we can apply the story to our lives. So check this guy out.
You work with a lot of fighters. For how many of them is it about money, and for how many is it about the pure love of fighting?
Well, the guys that get into it for the right reason are the guys who get into it for greatness, because you want to be the fucking best, right? And when you're in it for that reason,
Mhm.
right, you love it and you want to be looked at as the best ever, and you have the talent, the money happens, right? Then you have other guys who get in. Believe me, I've dealt with fighters who just wanted to be famous and just wanted to make money. You know what I mean? And it's, listen, it is what it is. It's your life, and you live it the way that you want, and do your thing. But the ones that are beloved are the guys who really want to be fucking great, and they're the ones that are remembered. And I mean, when you look at Tyson in his early years when he came up under Cus D'Amato, I mean, he was a student.
All right, so this is Dana White talking about two different kinds of fighters. This is a guy that's seen it all. I mean, he started the whole fight game essentially. He popularized it. And he's talking about there's two different reasons to fight. He's talking about the key motivation. And we already know all this, but if we look at it in the context of the hero story, let's listen to it one more time actually. So who
Of the game.
You work with a lot of fighters. For how many of them is it about money, and for how many is it about the pure love of fighting?
Well, the guys that get into it for the right reason are the guys who get into it for greatness, because you want to be the fucking best, right? And when you're in it for that reason,
Mhm.
right, you love it and you want to be looked at as the best ever, and you have the talent, the money happens, right? Then you have other guys who get in. Believe me, I've dealt with fighters who just wanted to be famous and just wanted to make money. You know what I mean? And it's, listen, it is what it is. It's your life, and you live it the way that you want, and do your thing. But the ones that are beloved are the guys who really want to be fucking great, and they're the ones that are remembered. And I mean, when you look at Tyson,
some fighters do it for greatness. Some fighters do it for the money. And he's saying he can tell the difference between these two fighters right away. He knows. And so we'll be thinking about, well, what kind of fighter are you? Right? We're talking about base motivations and how this impacts us. Greatness is another way of saying the hero. This is where the hero's narrative lives. All right, so we got that, and then let's take a look at one more clip actually. This is from Chariots of Fire, and he also talks about the reason for what he's doing.
I want you to do more than just watch a race. I want you to take part in it. I want to compare faith to running in a race. hard.
Okay, so this will just be, I guess this will just be an audio. Okay, we're going to put this guy back up. Okay, cool. Right, with the audio output capture. And then if you do this.
Requires concentration. You came to see a race today. See someone win. Happened to be me. But I want you to do more than just watch a race. Hard. When the wind of your dinner's burned. Concentration of will. Happened to be me. Fair soul. Permanent. Then where does the power come? Have faith. Maybe your dinner's burned. Tape. Especially if you've got a bet on it. But how long does that last? You go home. Maybe your dinner's burned. Maybe you haven't got a job. So who am I to say believe? Have faith in the face of life's realities. I would like to give you something more permanent, but I can only point the way. I have no formula for winning the race. Everyone runs in her own way, or his own way. Then where does the power come from to see the race to its end? From within. Jesus said, "Behold, the kingdom of God is within you. If with all your hearts ye truly seek me, ye shall ever surely find me." If you commit yourself to the love of Christ, then that is how you run the straight race. If God is with you. Winning the race, realities. Maybe I'm to give you something more permanent. So who am I to say believe, have faith in the face of life's realities. I would like to give you something.
Okay, let's take a look at this clip from Chariots. We'll listen to this clip from Chariots of Fire. And he's talking about how you finish a race. What it takes to finish a race well. So here you go. Listen to this here.
So who am I to say believe, have faith in the face of life's realities? I would like to give you something more permanent, but I can only point the way. I have no formula for winning the race. Everyone runs in her own way, or his own way. Then where does the power come from to see the race to its end? From within. Jesus said, "Behold, the kingdom of God is within you. If with all your hearts ye truly seek me, ye shall ever surely find me." If you commit yourself to the love of Christ, then that is how you run the straight race.
All right, so what's he doing here? He's saying, how do you finish a race? Where do you find that inner strength? That inner strength. And for him, he likened it to faith and how you remain faithful through life. And you do that, like his love of Christ, the story of Christ is what inspires him to do that. So what he did is he took the race, this narrative of running a race, which is a pretty mundane narrative, in a way. He's just running. And he's linking it to a higher narrative, and that's how he's finding that inspiration. Hold on. All right. So he's talking about a race. He's talking about how do you find the inspiration to push yourself even further. And he talks about his religion, Jesus, and he's linking that race to that higher narrative. He's finding a higher narrative. Dana White was talking about there's two kinds of fighters. You know, why you do something is a story. It's a story that you tell yourself. Some do it for money. And you probably picture the riches and the women and the partying and all that stuff that comes with money. Or you do it for greatness, and that looks like maybe a slightly different story that plays out for you. And so the question is, which story will bring out the best in you? And that's what we're going to talk about right now. So we talked about what this story is, the hero's narrative. Everyone knows it. It's the knight in shining armor, slaying the dragon, rescuing the princess. That's the simplest version. And then it gets more, it gets more to the hero's pattern with a movie like Star Wars, Dune, of course, Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, The Matrix. A lot of these epic movies that have been watched and people have been enthralled by around the world. And this is a story of motivation. We talked about how the story maps on to our physiology, specifically our motivation systems, our motivational biology. We talked about this thing called dopamine, this dopaminergic system, this ancient system within us that is our primary motivation system. This is how we, it's how we summon the desire and the energy to pursue the things that we want. And the quality of the narrative that we have is what determines how much the system is unlocked, the proportion to which this system um, like unlocks within us. So, how do you enter into this narrative? How would you begin this journey? And also, why would you do it? Maybe we should go over why real quick. So, basically, when you think about motivation, in order to accomplish any kind of goal, it requires effort. Essentially, it requires some amount of pain, where you have to, there's a cost to it. It costs energy, it costs resources to get to another place. Even if you're just going across the street to get to the corner store, that is like a motivational task that you need to. Let's think about that. Even to get to the corner store, that requires a certain amount of energy, and whatever you want from that store has to be worth it for you to spend that energy. When we talk about motivation, what we're talking about is the key sources of meaning for our lives. So we talked about how you could think of your emotional states as like chemical profiles. And so, you could think about motivation from a top down, or how to find meaning and how to achieve fulfillment and have a life that's meaningful and fulfilling and exciting and engaging. We could talk about it from a religious perspective, from a narrative perspective, but I think what's really interesting is to use the language of today's religion. And that language is science. And so we can start with the granular. We talked about how, right. And so you could think of these different states, these desirable states, a state of feeling like that you matter, that your life is significant, that your life is filled with meaning, that you feel connected, that these feelings are, you could say, are simply chemical states, that they're some combination of dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin. Those are sort of the three main feel-good chemicals. And you can throw adrenaline in there too, but the adrenaline sort of is related to dopamine, which we'll talk about. But so then you could ask the question, well, how do I induce these states? How do I get these chemicals in the right proportion at the right time for the longest period of time? And of course, you could try cocaine. You could try these quick solutions that we know deep in our soul are not the right way. Partying, drugs, sex, money. These are the more superficial things that we try to use to manipulate our system into producing these good feelings. How do we do this in a way that's sustaining, that feels wholesome, that doesn't destroy us in the end? Well, let's talk about first what dopamine is and what it does for us and why it's so valuable. The dopamine system is the primary reward system. And when I mean reward, what I mean are emotional rewards, sensory rewards, that feeling of well-being, that you're accomplished, that you have a high status, that you have a life that's powerful and significant and connected and exciting, that you're doing something that matters. Dopamine is what you feel when you experience those things. And so it's like, well, how do I get more of that stuff? How do I wake up excited for the day? So dopamine does, we've watched this movie called Dune. And in Dune, there's this thing called the spice. And the spice allows you to see into the future, and it gives you all these abilities. And so dopamine is kind of like the spice in IRL. It's like the real life spice. Dopamine does three major things for you. When you can activate your dopamine system, three things happen. The first thing that happens is when dopamine gets released into the brain, it creates chemical changes. It creates a condition called neuroplasticity. And neuroplasticity simply means your brain is prepared to change. And so you may have heard that when you learn something, what happens is you create new pathways in your brain. And when you have dopamine in your system, you create those pathways much easier. And so your brain is preparing to acquire new skills, new information, incorporate them into your physiology. So that's the first thing it does. The second thing it does is it provides neural energy. So dopamine is a precursor, is upstream of the production of adrenaline. So the brain will take dopamine and use it to produce adrenaline, noradrenaline. Adrenaline, noradrenaline. And what that does is it gives you the ability, it gives you mental energy, the ability to process information, to think, to come up with new plans, new alternatives, to think creatively. That all comes from dopamine. So it prepares your brain to learn, it gives you the energy to learn, and the last thing it does is it prepares your overall physiology. So I talked about the famous experiment with there's a set of nurses, two sets of nurses. To one set of nurses, they told them, hey, we know you don't get enough time to exercise, but did you know your job actually provides you with a lot of exercise? Your job is actually really good for you. It counts as exercise. And they probably went through all these different ways in which their job is beneficial to their bodies and to their health. And then to the other half of the nurses, they didn't say anything. 6 to 12 months down the road, they measured the different levels of their physiology, and wouldn't you know it, the ones that had that vision that their job was good for them, that their job was going to help their bodies, they had better health outcomes than the ones who weren't told that information. And so whenever those women went to work, they were thinking, oh yeah, this is great, like I'm actually getting exercise, I'm actually doing good things for my health. That dopamine release prepared their physiology to actually benefit more from their jobs than the ones who were probably thinking, oh man, like I don't exercise enough, I don't have time because I have to work. And so dopamine is kind of like the self-fulfilling prophecy. If you believe it, then it happens. If you believe something's good for you, then it will increase the outcome. Now obviously there's limits. You can't just sit on your couch all day and think you're going to become an Olympic athlete, but it does have an impact. So I want to talk about how, right, so you've heard these different, mystical phrases or pieces of wisdom where it's like, seek first the kingdom of God and all these things will be added to you. And that's the idea that if you just pursue your highest good, that whatever you need will be given to you. And you could think of that as a dopaminergic statement. I tell you, this dopamine system it tells a story of our physiology in such an ancient way. It's like this mystical system that seems to line up with a lot of the wisdom, the ancient wisdom that we get from these ancient religions. So if we chase after this highest narrative, whatever we need will be provided to us. And we learn that dopamine is released in proportion to the perceived value of whatever goal that we're choosing. So in other words, the bigger the goal, the more we desire something, the more something inspires us, the bigger the release of dopamine. And so if you're thinking, oh man, I don't know, this is such a big goal, I don't know if I can do it, can I get a gold medal, can I start this company, can I become a great singer, whatever your dream is, what dopamine says is that you may not have what you need now, but the dopamine system will prepare you to acquire new skills, to give you the energy to learn new skills, and to prepare your physiology to benefit from whatever skills you are pursuing. So if you start the journey, what the dopamine system says is that it will provide you with what you need, that it will change your physiology. You will become a different person. It almost turns you into like a superhuman. So those are the benefits of dopamine. So then the question is, well, how do we unlock this system? And that's kind of what Dana White was talking about. He was saying, He can tell the difference between the great fighters and the ones that are just doing it, the ones that are doing it for greatness and the ones that are just doing it for the money. That the outcomes are different between those two fighters, those two types of fighters, and the differences are motivation. And it's well known that, we can think of some different Bible verses where it's like, you can't chase God and money, right? You can't serve two masters. I don't know if you've heard this verse before. It's actually kind of a nice verse. I'll pull it up. Jump over here. So we'll look at this guy. Did that come through? Let me see. Oh, I highlighted. Oh, some of these things don't highlight. Oh, that's so interesting. Okay, so right in here, no one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and wealth. So what Jesus is saying here is there's a fundamental conflict between your highest good and money. And what he's talking about is a prioritization. Look, money's great. I'm not ever going to tell you that money is not important. Trust me, I know that money is important. I lost a ton of it, and I budget every week now. But what he's saying is that the pursuit of money alone, from a dopamine perspective, what he's saying is that the pursuit of money alone is not going to be enough to sustain you. That you can't serve this highest good and serve money at the same time. You can't put money above. He's basically saying money is not the right motivation to fully unlock your physiology. It won't provide you with enough dopamine for enough amount of time to give you that good feeling that you want. So here we're talking about, okay, what's the right goal? How do we find the right motivation such that we fully unlock this magical system within us? And basically Dana White hit it on the head. He said, you have to chase after greatness. It has to be something above money. It has to be something eternal, basically, greatness that has a feeling of eternity. And essentially it's just the hero's story. To become the hero, the greatest of all time, the celebrated by the people. You were like the hero. You're saving the people. That is the hero's story. So we hear this. We're hearing this from Dana White. We hear this from Jesus. We're hearing it from the neurologist that this hero story is critical to unlocking who we are, who we truly are. And then we have this other idea of this Chariots of Fire guy, where he said he's running this race, and then what does he do? He talks about what does it take to finish a race? And then he kind of moves into the love of Jesus, the story of Jesus, your love of Jesus. That's what you use to finish a race. And so what is he doing? He's tying in a higher narrative in order to build up the dopamine for him to find the motivation to do something that's painful. He's trying to increase the reward so that he can finish this task in the best way possible. Because by increasing the reward, he's increasing the dopamine, which provides you with all these special things, right? It changes your physiology so that you can accomplish what you're trying to do that much better. The motivational story that you tell yourself, your narrative, is absolutely critical to unlocking these good feelings that you want. This is, everyone has had the feeling of not being able to get out of bed in the morning, or you just are dragging your feet trying to get to work. Well, why is that? Well, it must be because you hate your job. There's no other, that the reward for completing the task of getting out of bed, brushing your teeth, showering, getting dressed in the morning, all these activities when, you'd rather sleep in, overcoming that friction. Well, it's much easier to do that if you actually loved your job. Like, you probably would get up very, very early in the morning to catch a flight to go to Cancun, for example, because that has a high motivational reward. Basically, our lives are comprised of very small tasks. Most of the time, we're not doing anything particularly heroic. We're not, slaying enemies or curing cancer. We're pretty much just tying our shoes, getting on a subway, writing a paper, whatever, a bunch of micro tasks. And so it's like, well, then you could think of it as, well, how do we improve these areas of our life? So think of like two different kinds of people. You have like a normal person, and then you have, let's say, someone who wants to become a Navy SEAL. And they're both doing very similar activities. They both get up in the morning, they both get dressed, maybe they both go to the grocery store, they purchase food, they cook their food, they eat it, and then they perform some activities, and then they go to bed. And think how different it is for those two people. For the person who's just average Joe, just another day in his life, at a job that he kind of, he's sort of likes, but is okay. When he sits down for a meal versus the person who's training to be a Navy SEAL sits down for a meal, those are two very different things going on internally. The person training to be a Navy SEAL has probably weighed out his meal. He probably knows down to the gram how much protein, carbs, and fat he's consuming. If he's followed his plan, he's thinking, okay, this meal takes me one step closer to becoming a Navy SEAL. He then probably engages in a number of painful activities. Or when he grocery shops, he's buying very specific ingredients. When he cooks his meal, he's cooking in a very specific way. When he eats meal, all these things become very charged. They are filled with a feeling of accomplishment. And then when he goes to bed at night, he probably knows exactly the time he has to go to bed because he knows exactly how much sleep he needs to get in order to wake up at a very specific time. Everything is charged with meaning for that Navy SEAL. Whereas for most of us, we're just eating a meal because we're hungry. There's no higher narrative. And so one way to supercharge your life is to try to find a way to tie these small narratives to a bigger narrative. And we already do it. It's just that oftentimes our narratives are uninspiring. The work example. If you can't get out of bed in the morning, that's because your motivational system is impaired. They have this experiment where they suppress the dopamine sensing region in a brain. They did this in rats. It's always rats for some reason. And when they suppressed it, you can give a rat food, like you can just put it into their mouth and they'll eat it and they'll get pleasure from it. But if you put the food just one rat's length away, they will not they will not get up and go to it. Like they will not head to the food. Like they won't go and get the food. They will not go and get the food because they don't have the reward system is impaired. They don't have the dopamine. They can't summon the energy. Like they don't have the dopamine to produce the adrenaline to get to the reward. And so if you're depressed, if you feel like a loser, if you just feel like your life doesn't have much meaning, it's because you have an impaired narrative. You don't have a reason for continuing to move forward in the world. Because life is painful, there's a cost to everything. There's an energy output to everything. And your body punishes you for expending energy if it's not towards a worthy goal. So we have all these different goals. A lot of the goals that I used to have for me was I wanted to get through work so that I can go hang out with my friends. And there's some good stuff there, right? Obviously that connection is real sustaining, a real sustaining source of meaning and well-being. But a lot of it was partying and just trying to have fun. And basically hedonistic pleasures, as any old man or any time-tested wisdom will say, these rewards are not sustaining. And they're speaking, you could think of it as speaking dopaminergically, that these goals, these hedonistic goals, only go so far up the higher only go so far up your level of value that they won't sustain they won't provide you with enough of those feel-good chemicals to keep you going. And often a lot of these hedonistic pleasures are harmful to you. Like they create dangerous addictive loops, and they eventually can be destructive. And so it's like, okay, well, how do you find a worthy goal? How do you repair this narrative so that it's a meaning, so that whatever's up here now starts to charge everything below that with meaning? So it's like, you get up in the morning, you're brushing your teeth, you get dressed, maybe you exercise, you eat well, all these things you're doing in order to accomplish something. And if you don't have that thing at the top that's orchestrating all these other activities, just like that guy training to become a Navy SEAL, then things start to become meaningless. There's no dopamine associated. There's no higher meaning reason for basically for living, for all these different little tasks that you're doing, that you've been burdened to do. So if you're working just for the money, just so that you can pay rent and not suffer the disgrace of being homeless and the pain of being homeless, then that's a pretty low narrative. I mean, that's only going to produce just enough dopamine to just barely do a good enough job. And eventually that'll start to break down, especially when life becomes difficult or that job becomes difficult. So how do we tie in that higher narrative? Where Dana White, interesting enough, kind of gives us a clue. The ones that fight for greatness, the hero's narrative, or that Navy SEAL. Now, when we talk about goals that are worthwhile, we could talk about, well, what's the right goal? Well, you could think about, well, if you think about the goal of anything, right? You could think about what's the goal of a hammer, right? Or you can think about the destiny of a hammer. You could think of it that way too. Destiny by design. What is the destiny of a hammer? What is the highest goal, purpose of a hammer? Well, it's to hammer a nail. What's the destiny of a nail? It's to be hammered into a piece of wood so that you can bind things together. Well, how are we designed? How is our motivational reward system designed? They did this experiment. Well, you could think of it as like, well, what's the best feeling? What's the highest motivational reward? What will give us the best feeling? You could think of it that. What are the conditions under which we unlock the most pleasurable feelings, the highest motivational reward? It turns out they'd done this experiment, and they hooked up people to a bunch of different levers, and each lever tickled a different part of the brain. This is crazy that they even could do this, but they could tickle the part of the brain that's sexual pleasure. They tickled intoxication. Maybe they tickled accomplishment, and there's a number of different ones. Now there was one sensation that people would bar press this lever. They would lever press and try to get this feeling over and over again, over and above these other types of pleasurable sensations. So it's more motivating. This area was more motivating than sex. It was more motivating than intoxication. I don't know if there's but more motivating than sex, more motivating than intoxication. Those are two big ones. Those are the hedonistic pleasures. What do you think it was? What was the feeling? Well, it was located in something called the midline thalamus. It was produced by the nucleus reunion, and it was a feeling of anticipation and mild frustration. That they were anticipating something good, but there was a sense of challenge. And this part of the brain is the same area that lights up, they discovered in rats, when rats voluntarily move towards a source of danger. And that when this area is stimulated, that the rats weren't just flying into danger recklessly, just kamikazing. They would go in strategically, methodically, purposefully. And so what that means is that you were made for danger. that when you voluntarily approach danger, that you will produce literally the best sensation that you could ever have. It's the best feeling of your life. What does that mean? Well, a hammer's meant to hammer in a nail, right? Well, if we get the best reward, the best dopamine hit from approaching danger, well, then it must mean we're made for danger. That danger has to become a part of our lives. And this gets to what I would call the narrow path, or the hero's path. And so let's pull up this verse here. We're going to kind of weave in some mystical stuff. Let's see. Here we go. Enter through the narrow gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. Now, one thing that, if you've ever studied these ancient scriptures, whether it's, the Bible or Quran, whatever it is, you'll find that these deep truths have a way of reappearing in multiple places, everywhere. There's kind of a fractal truth to it that is true for the big things and it's true for the small things. So what is this narrow path that he's talking about? I think, maybe he's talking about belief in Jesus and that's the narrow path or whatever. But he's saying that this narrow path is not just difficult to travel on, but it's difficult to even find. It's hard to even find this path. What is this hero's path? Well, what would a neurologist say this path might be? So basically, when you encounter difficulties or danger, stressful situations, you have two different kinds of responses. You have a fight or flight response, and then you have a voluntary response. Now, the fight or flight response is automatic, and it's very, very powerful. You've all experienced this when something unexpected happens, and suddenly you're in this crisis mode. Someone bumps into you while you're walking down the street. You probably have a reaction like, "What's going on?" And then your thinking brain activates and goes, "Oh, he just bumped into you. It's no big deal. There's no threat here." The ability to move from your autonomic fight or flight response to your thinking brain is what I would call the narrow path, the hero's path. It's very difficult to do. So the problem with the autonomic system, this very fast fight or flight response system, well, there's some good things about it, and those end up being kind of bad things when we talk about how the system works. So, oh my goodness. The autonomic system is incredibly fast and efficient. It rallies. What is the word? Rallies. It gathers. It. What's the word for rally? It rallies, gathers. Rally. Synonym. Gathers. It aggregates. It utilizes. It calls upon. It recruits. Activates. To gather the necessary resources. Rally the troops. It pulls together. It Basically, what it does is it awakens multiple pathways in you, and it's a very energetic system. And fight or flight, right? You're boom, you go 0 to 100. So it's very efficient, you become very powerful into the system. The only problem is it's a non-differentiating system. It's a globalizing system. And so when you use the autonomic system to evaluate a situation, a context, you're always going to over evaluate it, overcompensate for whatever's happening. If someone just bumps into you, you're almost ready to punch a guy in the face. But what happens is your prefrontal cortex steps in and says, no, wait, that's not an appropriate response. Now, getting bumped into is kind of a very small stressor, but if someone is yelling at you, then this might awaken your fight or flight response, and that might be a large response. And your ability to then access your thinking brain becomes very, very difficult. I equate it to trying to like read a book during a fire alarm. Like the sprinklers come on, you're getting wet, and there's like horns blaring in your ear, like an alarm blaring in your ear, and you're trying to like read the dictionary or like read a book. It's very, very difficult to calm that system. Now, what's cool about the prefrontal cortex, though, is that not only does it receive information from the body, somatic signals, so it'll receive information from the autonomic system, and then it uses that information to try to assess the context. It also is able to send signals back to the body. So the prefrontal is hooked up to something called the vagus nerve, and this vagus nerve is involved with controlling the heart, the lungs, and your gut. These are the three main pieces of your autonomic system. And if you can wait long enough, if you can override the involuntary response to clap back at someone, to respond in anger in an automatic way, if you can just wait, your prefrontal will end up sending signals to your body to calm it down. And when it does that, it starts to spin up new, it starts to analyze different contextual possibilities. So if someone's yelling at you a lot, you think this guy's trying to get me, you're just defending yourself, and then if you can just calm yourself in that moment, try not to respond, your prefrontal would say, we don't need to defend ourselves here. This guy is just XYZ, or maybe what he's saying, he just had a bad day today, or you're trying to access these different rule sets. And when you do that, your system calms down. And then when it calms down, you come up with a different set of rules with which you can move forward. And then what you do is you take that rule set and you courageously, voluntarily decide to move forward. When you access your when you do something voluntarily, you're accessing an entirely different system. And this is the dopamine reward system. And what did I say? Voluntarily moving into danger provides you with the best feeling you will have in your life. That's what this narrow path is. That's what this story of the prefrontal cortex and the autonomic system is saying. So we can find the hero story in these micro narratives as well as these macro narratives. I think so. I had the story with my sister. Basically, here's an example of how this can play out. So, my sister was going on this vacation to Scotland, and she has a cat and a dog, and she needs someone to look after her cat and dog. Now, she last minute had to extend the vacation by a few days. I don't even know why. And so she texts me on Sunday, and Sunday's the worst day to ask me to do anything because I'm very, very fatigued from work. And so my thinking system is kind of dampened and is impaired, and so what happens is my autonomic takes over. So I'm kind of prone to fight or flight. I'm very irritable, and I can be stressed out easily. But I'm aware of this, so I try to comp. But man, I have so much gas. It's gonna be hard to do if I end up having a sermon. All right, so And so she wanted me to she's like, hey, can you take care of these animals? And I was like, oh, okay, so, you know, what would that entail? So I'm kind of like in this fight or flight, but I'm kind of trying to access my prefrontal and say, okay, you know, just be calm here. Don't do anything you're going to regret. It's kind of what my prefrontal is trying to tell me. And she wants me to not just take care of the animals, but she wants me to take care of them, to bring them to meet the sitter, to meet. So she has this cat and dog sitter. It's a pretty long story, I guess. But she has this cat and dog sitter who can only take care of the animals for the first 5 days, but the last 2 days she needs someone to look after them. And I have to meet the sitter on a Sunday at her boyfriend's house, and she wants me to sleep over at the house. Like, I can't even just bring the animals to my own place. So I'm just thinking, this is disrespectful. She's not respecting my time. She's, you know, all these different things. I'm getting very, very upset. And my autonomic arousal is going up. Like, you know, my heart's beating faster, my breathing is getting deeper, and, you know, my stomach is feeling these butterflies because I'm getting ready to fight. And so that's all I'm hearing is like, you know, how can she just assume that, you know, she's disrespecting my time, all these different things, right? I'm getting very enraged. And so I decide to, you know, try to calm down and give her a call. Like, I'm about to send this really mean message or a text, and I thought, you know what, let's not do it over text. Let's do it over the phone. She's in Scotland at this time. And so I pick up the phone, I call her, and I say, hey, you know, like, what happened here? Like, how are we? I'm just trying to ask questions. I'm trying to be curious. All I can hear are voices of rage, and the only thing I can figure out, the only posture I can take that won't be destructive is just to ask questions. So I'm like, hey, how, you know, what happened? Like, what happened here? She's like, you know, like, I had to change it last second. I didn't realize that the animal sitter, the pet sitter couldn't make it. And so, and I know I'm asking all these different things, and you know what? I'm really sorry. Like, she just kind of broke down. She's like, you know, I'm really sorry. Like, and, you know, at that moment, I just thought that calmed me down. And I just thought, you know what? She's bailed me out a number of times. You know, let me just do her this favor. She's already in Scotland. She's meeting with her kids. Like, she's doing a lot of things that are important to her. Let me just help her out. So I decided to head over, and it, you know, and I thought, you know what, her boyfriend has a really nice apartment. It's much nicer than mine. And so, you know, is that, you know, there are worse things that someone can ask you to do than stay in a really nice apartment, you know, for a night. So when I think about that, I made that phone call, and, you know, I ended it with like, hey, you know, don't worry about it. Have a great trip. Just have a great trip. Don't worry. I'll take care of everything. And she was really thankful, and I felt like that was a step forward. And that was me accessing that narrow path. That was a little bit of a mini hero's journey. That the danger for me was that I'm getting taken advantage of, that this is a wrong, that she is somehow attacked, you know, there's some attack being levied against me, that there's an injustice, all these different things, and I was able to find that narrow path. The goals that will awaken us, the ones that will give us these good feelings, that will make us feel alive and connected and have a life of meaning and significance, one criteria for them is they have to be scary. They have to make us feel uncomfortable. They have to give us that hero's, that part of that hero's narrative where the hero is reluctant. It has to make you feel like, oh, it has to make you scared but also excited. So it can't be just money. We know this, and you know this. It can't be just money. It can't be just the fame. It has to be something deeper. Something has to awaken your passions. How do we find out this narrative? You can do it by finding the highest narrative that you can think of. If that's money, then just start there. Whatever it is, you just have to start there, but know that you're going to have to search for something higher. It can be as simple as cleaning your room, that there is, in fact, dopaminergic reason to clean your room, because what happens is, that what happens is dopamine is a momentum system. That if you get a little bit of dopamine, that what it does is it gives you a little bit of that neural energy. It gives you the ability to make plans. It kind of facilitates your prefrontal cortex. And so now you have more ability to think a little bit better, to think a little bit more clearly about the future and what you really love. So come up with a routine. Routines are a great way to get dopamine going in your system. Jordan Peterson is a great whole set of advice that try to improve something. Organize your sock drawer. You know, he tells a great story about that, about this guy who he had been living in his in his mom's house. He was like 30 or 40 years old, and he was still living in the same bedroom that he grew up in, and that it was a complete mess. And Jordan Peterson was like, well, why don't you just try to vacuum the room? He's like, all right. And so, or try to bring the vacuum in the room. And what he did is he brought the vacuum in the doorway and left it in the doorway and walked over it for like a full week. And basically that was too hard a task. But the idea is you try to improve something. Do something of that you know is valuable. For example, cleaning is one where, or washing your dishes is a good example, where you wash it and then you put it in the cupboard. You've decided that the cupboard is a place that your dishes belong, and that your dishes should be clean for a number of reasons. And so when you wash dishes and put them in the cupboard, that you are completing a dopaminergic loop. What's up, viewer? How's it going? We're talking about dopamine and how to find meaning in your life, and we're approaching it from a bottom-up strategy. So thinking about what are the chemicals in our brain. You could think of happiness, meaning, connection as different chemical states. That it's a different cocktail of chemicals that are being produced in your brain. You could think that could be kind of a nihilistic way of thinking about it. Okay, he's gone. So if you complete this dopaminergic loop, then you have that foundation to stand on for your next task. And so you start the loop again. And every time you approach a task, a task is like a mini dragon. So you're activating that nucleus reunion, that very pleasurable, anticipatory, mild frustration system, where you're giving yourself little hits of good feelings. And these good feelings can build on each other. So if you want to figure out what your life's calling is, start a routine. Try to find some kind of routine where the more you go down the same pathway, the more efficient that pathway becomes. It becomes easier and easier to head down that path. And if that pathway is virtuous in the sense that it's something that actually benefits you, then what you're doing is you're just making it really easy to get these little hits of dopamine. And again, it builds on itself. And so you just continue to build these routines. It will give you the energy to think about what you want to improve in your life. And you just keep doing that until you're able to move further and further up the hierarchy of values. And by hierarchy of values, I mean that you're getting higher and higher up that master motivation, that master goal that then dictates, orchestrates all the other goals, and it fills all those other goals with meaning. And as much as you can, you want to associate every part of your life with a higher meaning, because that higher meaning is what gives the largest dopamine release. You'll find that as you're able to come up with or conceive of higher and higher goals, that much of what you try to avoid in life now becomes a reward. This, what I call pain inversion. That now suffering becomes a source of pleasure. That suffering unlocks dopamine. I mean, you know, if you ever try to work out and you're trying to get stronger and you're benching and you can feel that pain feels good because you feel like, yeah, I'm becoming an animal, I'm becoming strong. That's why working out is addictive. But only if you value your body becoming stronger, which most people do. But it just, you know, it depends. The degree to which you value it will be the degree to which you're able to participate in a sustained exercise program. All right, that's it. Oh my god, that was so hard. That was one of the hardest fucking things I've ever done. I hope that was worth it. I don't even know if it was worth it. That was fucking painful.